here to tell you about the California Seaweed Festival and welcome you in.
We've got a great lineup of speakers, from chefs to artists to scientists to farmers to entrepreneurs, community members.
And we want to just briefly say why we're doing this. So we're doing this because we have been working with seaweeds in the ocean and in research labs and in aquaculture facilities for years. And we want to share the awesomeness with more people. We want you to know what's happening in the ecosystem with seaweeds, what they're doing for us, and what we can do with them, because there are more than 800 species of seaweed in California.
So we hope you will enjoy the great lineup of speakers we have and ask questions in the chat box. And we'd also like to thank our sponsors.
Our sponsors are California Sea Grant, CSUN, Yukon, and our industry partners, Sway, the Cultured Abalone Farm, and Sunken Seaweed. We look forward to sharing this week with you.
Thank you. Share with your friends and see you there.
Oh, hello.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the California Seaweed Festival 2020. Apologies for a little bit of a delay. Hope you're still there. And we've got a great program for you. Janet?
So we're going to be screening a couple of videos right now. One of the first things we would do if festival in person, face-to-face, is tour one of the seaweed growing facilities in California. So what we have for you first to just get the festival rolling is recorded farm tour from, it's going to be about 17 minutes long, and I'm going to start it up right now.
Hi, my name's Doug. I am the general manager and partner of the Cultured Abalone Farm, which is an abalone farm located in Santa Barbara County, California. We are a land-based marine aquaculture shellfish farm, which means we pump seawater from the ocean to a system of land-based tanks where we grow the California native red abalone. And red abalone, in case you don't know, are little marine snails. They are just like garden snails, except instead of eating basil and your arugula starts out of your garden, they eat seaweed. And so you eat our abalone seaweed. And this is the stuff. This is the abundant macrocystis giant kelp. It is a brown algae, a brown alga native to the California coastline, which grows in huge stands, which are known well as kelp forests. So this is a tremendously regenerative, stable, sustainable harvest. This is something where we're able to harvest the top of the canopy. The base of these plants is constantly sending up these shoots, which are buoyed by these little air bladders, and they reach the surface and bend along the surface of the ocean, where our kelp harvester, which is a glorified lawnmower, an aquatic lawnmower if you will drive through the canopy at a very, very low speed, clip these stalks, and pull the seaweed strands onto our boat where we harvest. So we harvest a couple times a week, and we're going to bring in anywhere from 12 to 20 tons of fresh cut macrocystis every week, and that's like bringing in the hay for the cows. That is the forage. That's the feed and the basis of our abalone production system. So what you see here is a tank full of abalone, sized and in the production process. And this seaweed is put in on top of the tanks And over the course of about 2 or 3 days, the abalone that are stocked to this tank will eat all of this seaweed down, converting a very low trophic primary productivity piece of vegetative matter into a high value niche gourmet seafood product. And let me pull a couple of these out of the tank for you. So this is it. This is our guy. This is our red abalone, and the reason we do this. So these cute little dudes are vegetarians. But instead of filter feeding like a mussel or a scallop or an oyster, they graze on the leafy greens of the California kelp. And that's all we do. It sounds simple, and repeat until we send these guys off to market. Okay, so a real as much as 10 times per year. That means the entire biomass grows up through the water column into the canopy, senesces, rots, falls away to the ocean floor, and then it happens again. So multiple cycles in a single year, you have the entire fixed nutrient basis of a kelp forest, which is turning over again and again and again. And it's because it has this unbelievable fast growth rate in the springtime conditions. But what happens in the fall? It's very dependent. Photo period, water temperatures are warmer in the late summer and the early fall, and you see a shift in the kelp ecology. The kelp tends to yellow, it becomes a little bit lower in nutrients, it tends to bleach. And those kelp fronds will fall away and rot and become drift kelp and become part of the coastal ecosystem in a different sort of way. But what's important and I think really significant and sometimes missing from this conversation is that when that kelp rots or is consumed in the ocean, it is mineralized, and any fixed carbon, any CO2 that is absorbed by the kelp during the growth phase is remineralized back into the ocean. So when we talk about fixing CO2 from the seas, one of the critical components of that process is for the carbon that is locked up in seaweeds to actually get fixed into a stable form. So that's where grazers, abalone, or the carbon that's found in the calcium carbonate of shell material really emerges as a stable storage form for fixed carbon. And that's a little slice of the role that this macrocystis and its massive growth and turnover can play when we harvest it and use it for a purpose where that carbon is fixed into a more stable state. Then we're actually extracting dissolved carbon from the seas and putting it in a fixed storage. So they say that if you're a dairy farmer, which you really are as a grass farmer, right? You have to understand the food that's making the grass that's making the milk. We have to understand the seaweed that's making the... And we've been messing around with quite a while. What we found is this is a really great nursery food for the baby abalone that are coming out of the hatchery. That macrocystis is pretty beefy stuff. It's trying to feed like a steak to a baby. This is a little bit more digestible and delicate, so they're little juvenile 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter baby abalone coming out of the hatchery. They can get their face around this stuff and it's a little bit more palatable. It also happens to make a really fantastic seaweed salad. It's got a real nice crunchy mouthfeel. It doesn't have that kind of leathery aspect that some seaweeds have, and a really like bright umami flavor. And for a long time we noticed that the abalone grew really fantastically well on this stuff, and we distributed it largely to protein. We thought, oh, it's probably high in protein, and we did a CHN analysis on it, and we found, yes indeed, this ogo has more nitrogen in it than the macrocystis, and we just accepted that nitrogen was a pretty good proxy for protein, and we didn't think much more about it. Turns out it doesn't have a lot of very good quality protein at all. What it has is it has a lot of a very low quality amino acid called glutamic acid. Well, that glutamic acid is umami. So that umami flavor comes specifically from that glutamic acid content in this. So delicious as a seaweed, really nice for a poke, and really great as a nursery food for the baby abalone. It grows spectacularly fast. We'll stock these 1,000-gallon tanks with about 12 kilos, and in about 2 weeks, we'll have over 30 kilos. Really, really quick growth. And what you see here is you'll see the aeration of these tanks just rotates the seaweed so that it comes up, gets a little bit of light, rotates back down into the tank. And this is called tumble culture. Some seaweeds do very well in tumble culture, others do not. But this one has worked out very well for us, and we're now growing easily between 600 and 1,000 kilos a week of this ogo. You'll see here there's some strings of this other green. This is one of the fastest growing seaweeds in the world, and we kind of treat it as a little bit of a pest. This is ulva. It grows extraordinarily fast, and if we leave it, it'll just take over everything. We don't favor it because it's very high in phosphorus and it gives kind of an off flavor to the abalone. So we don't feed it too much as an abalone feed, but occasionally we do get some inquiries from some seaweed people that are interested in this ulva. It's got a different flavor profile, but creative chefs all over the world are working with almost all the seaweeds, including ulva, and coming up with some pretty fantastic applications in the human culinary world. All right. So the ogo that we showed you, we're able to grow that stuff year-round. This is dulse, or palmaria, and this is obviously another red. The little baby abalone absolutely love this stuff, but it's a little trickier and a little bit. This stuff loves the winter time and the springtime. It's a little more sensitive to it in the lengthening photo period. Right now we're in end of October. The photo period is just crashing, and when it does, this stuff kind of just stops growing. So we don't typically try to grow this stuff and use it too much this time of year. But the baby abalone absolutely love this stuff. They do very, very well on it. Little different, not as palatable raw for human use, but toasts really nice. If you put it in the oven or the toaster oven at a low temperature and dry it out, it gets a really nice flavor. This is the famous bacon seaweed, that if you flash fry it in hot oil or toast it, it really has that sort of bacon-esque kind of flavor. You know, very, very, very popular. But again, a beautiful red. One of the things that's kind of neat about red abalone is that they're not red on their own. Red abalone are red because they eat red seaweeds, and because they live at depths of the water where the red seaweeds are the prevalent species of seaweed, prevalent species of algae that they can eat. So the pigments in these seaweeds accumulate in the shell and give the shell the red color. So that's where the red in the red abalone comes from. If you feed a red abalone all brown seaweed, it'll have a kind of a greenish shell. But because we supplement our abalone with these red algae that we cultivate here in-house, we get a real beautiful red striping on a lot of the shells that we have from the animals that we grow. So we're constantly in tinker mode. We're constantly looking for other candidate species for seaweeds that we can grow. You know, nothing grows that well if it's only fed one thing. And we've always sort of believed that if we diversify the abalone diet with a whole host of different algal species, then we're also diversifying all the little amino acid groups, all the marine sugars, all the weird little building blocks that make something like sort of a whole nutrition application. So I'm here with Dr. Janet Kubler, Cal State Northridge, and we were successful in getting a grant through PSMFC to explore the viability of 2 novel species of native California seaweeds for commercial cultivation. We're in a really enviable position because we have an in-house use for any seaweeds that we grow. So we can use any seaweed we grow, and we can also sort of let the market for any seaweed that we're successful in growing develop sort of organically. So what we have here are 2 beautiful species. This is Laminaria farlowii, or as we have decided to begin calling it, California golden kombu. And attached to the same little clump we have here are chondrocanthus, or Turkish towel, known for its little nubblies. And these are two super interesting species, just based solely on the real interesting starches, and this one's very high in carrageenan. They're very, very different from one another, obviously, not just in appearance, but in the potential nutrition content and what they can be. So I'm going to throw it over to Janet and let her talk a little bit about each of these species.
Okay. All right. So something that we're interested in looking to the future is seaweed crops that we know will be stable as the climate changes, right? That we can continue to grow like for decades out in the future. So both of these seaweeds fit this profile of things that have a higher temperature tolerance. The Laminaria farlowii is a Southern California to Baja California native plant, usually grows in deep water, but we can get really fast growth rates of it if we bring it up closer to the light. So this is something that isn't really harvested commercially right now because it's a little hard to get to, but it has huge potential for growing on in ocean seaweed farms. This one, Chondrocanthus, is wild harvested and grown in tumble culture in some parts of the world. Wild harvested in California for a variety of purposes, like for cosmetic use. It is both of these actually are perennial. This one lives up to 6 years in the wild. So there's a possibility of reharvesting this one. This one makes new fronds. As you can see here, it has this larger frond and a bunch of smaller ones. So if you had this growing on a line, you could harvest the big ones and still have it keep going without having to restart the farm on the line. And both of these store a lot of nitrogen in their tissue. So if they have a good nitrogen supply during the times of the year when there's lots of upwelling, they can store that and use that later to help them be thermally tolerant. Right? So they're good potential species for climate resilient seaweed aquaculture.
We hope you enjoyed that video. That was fantastic. Janet and Doug, you guys did such a great job. I want to visit the farm now.
Okay, that's what we're going for, is we want people to get the feeling that you can visit through the California Seaweed Festival, even though we're virtual this year. And there'll be some more video later in the day and a live presentation from another farm because it's Seaweed Farming Day.
And
okay.
Apologies if those of you viewing this had a little bit of a delay in streaming. We're still figuring out the details, but hopefully it'll be all smooth sailing from now on.
Okay, we have another video to screen. You want to introduce that one, Simona?
Sure. So our next video is professionally made by CNBC, and it's a shorter one, but goes over all the different demands for seaweed and all the different products. And, take it with a grain of salt. Have a panelist. We're going to have several key industry experts speaking about their farms and their experience with farming. So please do come back at 4 p.m. today. And we have a whole week planned, other than the farming day today. All week we're going to have, for example, tomorrow we have a great lineup of chefs. So there's going to be cooking with chefs, as well as a live cooking demo. So tomorrow we have the YouTube videos. So we're going to stream videos at noon, and then we have the panel at 4 p.m. and at 5 p.m. we're going to have a live cooking demo. So definitely tune into that. That's going to be fun. Wednesday is going to be Science Day. We've got a great lineup of speakers for science. And Thursday we've got art. Then moving on to sustainable innovation on Friday. We also have a speakeasy on Friday, so that's going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And that's going to be open to everybody. You just have to register on our website. And basically that will allow you to ask any questions, talk informally to any of these seaweed experts. So we hope you can join us for that. That's the speakeasy on Friday at 5 p.m. So again, feel free to register for that on our website, californiaseaweedfestival.com. And then Saturday, we're really excited. We've got ocean themed yoga at 2 o'clock. And then we're going to have some videos at 3 o'clock. And we'll move into our panelist session on ocean conservation, community involvement, and fun activities. So that's going to be our last panel on Saturday. So we've got a whole week of activities, and we hope you can tune in.
Okay, great. I'm ready. So we have the next video again from CNBC. And make that live.
Just below the water, thousands of shellfish and acres upon acres of seaweed are growing. Of course, people are eating oysters or clams or mussels, but what about all of that green slimy stuff? Seaweed is used in more than just sushi. In fact, in America, using seaweed as food dates back to before of the nation, when pilgrims met with Native Americans and, for example, were taught about their cuisine, like clam bakes. Yes, a traditional clam bake included cooking up kelp aside all that shellfish. But since then, seaweed has transformed over and over again. You can find seaweed in more than just your dinner plate at your favorite Asian restaurant.
You know, they think, oh, it's not really food. It's kind of that slimy stuff on the beach. And, you know, people were really, really, really clear about this. Well, I wouldn't eat that. What, put that in my mouth? So imagine their surprise when I said, but you already do every day.
Seaweed could be in your toothpaste, in your almond milk, in your pricey moisturizer, or baby food, ice cream, and even your beer. Seaweed is used in medicines, and it can be used for fuel.
I think an algae-based fuel should be able to power all planes in the world.
All of this to say, the global demand for seaweed is expanding. The commercial seaweed market could surpass $85 billion before 2026. As for what it takes to farm seaweed, all you need is $20,000, 20 acres of water, and a boat. A single seaweed farm can $20,000 a year.
There's no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed, make it the most sustainable food on the planet. But at the same time, our crops soak up carbon, nitrogen, rebuild reef systems. So they really become engines of restoration as we're farming and trying to make a living.
Here's what makes up the seaweed industry.
Sometimes the smallest gestures can be
without accounting for selling costs like transportation or marketing, reached over $263.6 billion. That number accounts for products like fish, crustaceans, marine algae, and even pearls and seashells. But most of those billions are in fishing. And seaweed farmer Bren Smith would know. He was a fisherman for most of his life.
I never expected to grow vegetables underwater.
Beautiful, huh?
Now, I'm a fisherman, work the high seas, and I'm not an environmentalist in a traditional way. I'm a fisherman. I hunt and kill things. There's no way I can run my farm, run my small business unless I become a steward of the oceans and grow crops that are breathing life back into it.
Smith started out in seaweed farming after years of fishing on the high seas and bearing witness to the degradation of the world's oceans due to overfishing and climate change. He turned to what he calls restorative ocean farming.
Restorative or regenerative ocean farming is growing crops that breathe life back into the ocean.
The sort of chocolate color, that's all nitrogen.
So our seaweeds and shellfish require zero inputs, no freshwater, no fertilizer, no feed.
I'm actually proud of this.
This is what one of those farms looks like. Ropes of kelp seeds are strung through the ocean's surface like garland, and hanging beside kelp seeds are netting baskets of scallops and socks of mussels to grow in. At the bottom of the structure are crates growing oysters and clams. Smith went on to found Greenwave, a nonprofit organization training people to be ocean farmers.
And our goal is 10,000 farmers in 10 years to train. And so far we've trained about 160 farmers. We have a waiting list of 6,000 just in the US and requests in 102 countries. So the demand is huge.
In comparison to likely a lot of upstarts, starting a seaweed farm could be relatively low cost.
There's a low barrier to entry. Because we grow things that don't swim away and you don't have to feed, the overhead is extremely low. It takes basically $20,000 to $50,000, depending on the area, to start a farm. You need a boat and 20 acres, and you can be up and running.
And Smith points to a profit to be made.
We see the future of farms as being sort of 4 quadrants of income. 1, we're harvesting food. 2, harvesting byproduct like bioplastics, things like that. 3rd, we're harvesting data. Hope to do is sell that to insurance companies, government, things like that. And that's an income stream for every farm. Services. So farmers should be paid for the carbon they soak up, the nitrogen, and so we're developing and I think that's what climate resiliency looks like in the future.
Dr. Charles Yarish of the University of Connecticut has helped tons of ocean farms get started.
We're making up what people have done on land with land crops. We're doing it in a matter of maybe less than a decade. And then with the COVID virus, we had to really work hard about getting each of the farms harvested in a COVID-safe way.
Infrastructure remains the biggest challenge to scaling these farms. For example, a processing plant costs about $1.3 million. That plant would allow a farmer to process 2 million pounds of seaweed a year.
It's that infrastructure in the middle to stabilize and process the kelp. The good thing about our model is that it's cheap to do in water. It's just ropes and buoys. The challenge is when you hit land, you face all the challenges land-based farmers face. So we need to powder it dry, flake, and that infrastructure just doesn't exist, and it's really capital intensive.
Market demand is not a challenge for the seaweed industry right now. Besides being used for food, another big use of seaweed is colloids, specifically phycocolloids, like alginate, agar, and carrageenan. If those sound like strange words you might find in a nutrition label, you're right. These are seaweed-based food additives that can produce a certain consistency or texture. Seaweed is also increasing in popularity as a meat substitute.
It enhances the meatiness. It's full of natural umami, which people use a lot now to convey the idea of meat, but without the meat.
So one of the challenges of a lot of the plant-based foods is that it's soy-based, and soy is extremely destructive. So we want to replace those harmful inputs with things like seaweed.
It was actually McDonald's that first pioneered a burger using seaweed. Back in 1991,
Introducing
the
McLean
Deluxe,
made with a 91% fat-free beef patty.
And it was advertised as the NBA's official sandwich.
New McLean Deluxe will blow you away.
It was on the menu for 5 years. Colloids are not just a food additive. They're also present in medicine. For example, alginates are used in dental mold production and in wound dressings, and even diet pills. Seaweed is also found in the personal care sector. Alginates are used as dispersing and thickening agents in lotions, creams, and soaps. For example, the first ingredient in this moisturizer from La Mer is algae extract. 2 ounces of this lotion retails for $345. Colloids are also found in fabrics. Today, firemen's clothes is still treated with alginate for fireproofing. Another factor boosting the industry's valuation is demand for eco-friendly fertilizers.
Because many seaweeds also produce growth-regulating compounds. And these growth-regulating compounds are part of the biostimulants that are used in our land-based agriculture.
Hand in hand with fertilizers is animal feed.
Many animal feeds, whether they be cattle feeds, chicken feeds, hog feeds, actually have seaweed ingredients in them.
But also, some studies show it could be a way to fight climate change. So cows produce a lot of methane gas. And methane is a major greenhouse gas contributing to global warming. In 2016, Australia's James Cook University found that adding a small amount of a particular algae reduced methane production by 99%. Smith says a new climate economy is starting, and this can be seen in another use for seaweed: biofuel. That's where the Department of Energy's Mariner program comes in. The program aims to make better use of the United States underwater territory, because the US actually has more water than land, known as the Exclusive Economic Zone, and it's larger than the total land area of the US, including Alaska.
If you're producing it sustainably as a biofuel, you can replace fossil fuels because it's all photosynthetic.
The US Department of Energy estimates that seaweed biofuel can yield more energy per